All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Systems of Well podcast. I am your host, Noah Kronfly. We have a very special, incredible guest today with us, an absolute legend in the online marketing world. He is a speaker, a business consultant, strategist, artist, engineer. He is an author of many books: Ultimate Guide to Google AdWords, Ultimate Guide to Facebook Advertising, Definitive Guide to TikTok Advertising, 80/20 Sales and Marketing. The list goes on. I could probably spend quite a while detailing all the things that he's done and is currently doing. I've been fortunate enough to build a lot of my foundation as an entrepreneur, learning his principles, and it is the great Perry Marshall. Perry, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to have you. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And from the jump, really, I wanted to start off by saying thank you. I said it from the intro that I've built a lot of just who I am as a, entrepreneur, as a, professional, and as a person, just learning a ton from you and just the people that I've met through Planet Perry, just, not only just some of the most, sharp professionals, but just incredible humans. That's a really big part of it. I also wanted to say thank you for including me and bringing me in as a co-host for your 0 to 100K program. That was such an honor to be able to do that with you. um I don't even know if I have the grasp of the English language to really express my gratitude to you. That was just part of what I wanted to just say from the very beginning. And I think one of the true greatest gifts you've given me, and I know I have, as a young entrepreneur, and I still have so much to learn about life, about business, and still so much to learn from you. But I think what you've really given me is to critically think about me and who I am as an individual and build my business around who I am and what my strengths are. And that comes from listening within rather than searching externally for that type of validation. And there's real harmony in who I am and how I show up in my business. There's just a connection there. And so just from the jump, I really wanted to say thank you for all of
Well, I appreciate that you've actually internalized that. There's a lot of people who are just running around looking for some hack
Right.
that they can do, and they never really figure out who they are. And that's a very frustrating thing to be in.
Yes.
And so congratulations.
I appreciate it. I think that was,
Maybe ahead of a lot of people
yeah.
your age.
Well, I like I said, I feel very fortunate to have started from that. When I was, let's see, I was 21 when we first met at the 80/20 workshop. And then I think I was 22 when I got to be in the roundtable room because of Scott. So
Mm-hmm.
to not get 10 years into my journey and then have to unlearn a lot of the kind of bad habits, let's call them, and just
Mm-hmm.
do that from the very beginning and do a lot of the self inner work from the very beginning. Cause we'll talk about the head trash stuff, but that was something that I didn't realize so much of this accomplishment in your business career comes from just facing who you are as a person. That was nothing that I really ever learned, getting started. So, that's a really big part of it. So cool. Okay. So the way that I like to start these podcasts is really just a relatively basic question. Sometimes it can be a challenge, you'll this will be an interesting question for you because you do so much. But if someone asks you, hey Perry, what do you do? What do you say is your sort of quote official title? What do you say?
Well, let me tell you a story about that. I
Yeah,
went
tell me.
to a conference about a month ago where not very many people would know me, and I was also a little tired, and because I'd been on the road, and so that tends to push me more towards introvert. And a couple times I said, "I'm a marketing consultant," and usually they won't ask you anything else. They'll just
Right.
figure they know what you do.
Yep.
And really, that's not a very adequate answer, but I had to struggle with, well, if I tell them what I really do, it sounds like I'm bragging. And I'm a pastor's kid from Nebraska, and it's not very natural for me to do that.
Yes.
And I also don't like going into an environment where everybody's trying to impress everybody with how big their package is.
Right.
That kind of training is not, I don't enjoy that.
Right.
But um, I remembered a conversation I had years ago on an airplane. I mean, I don't know, 30 years old and just scrambling around and trying to figure stuff out. And I asked this guy what he did, and the answer was something like, I write white papers that cost $1 million to research, and they cause CEOs to like light a fire under a CEO's butt
Yes.
by and I could tell just listening to him that this guy was at a whole higher level.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a little more about what he did and said, look, most people are just swimming around this mediocre information and
Mm-hmm.
assumptions. And, we drill into these areas and we write these reports that'll just shock a CEO into
Yes.
taking action.
Right.
And it made an impression on me. It's like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, if you're going to put stuff out there, it ought to shake people by the lapels and get them to think. And I thought, well, what if that guy had just mumbled some mediocre answer
Of
because
course.
he felt like taking a nap? And so I went, I was thinking about this, and then I went to lunch at the conference, and then somebody, you sit down by some stranger, and they,
Yeah.
of course, they ask you,
Right.
and I say, I'm the author of 10 books. I organized a $10 million prize for the origin of the genetic code. I founded a cancer and evolution working group, and I don't know, a couple other things. And that's what I really do. And I'm about 1/3 scientist, 2/3 entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, author, coach. And that actually led to an interesting conversation.
Right.
It got us into a discussion about biology, and 15 minutes later,
Mm.
6 people sitting around in a circle. They're like, I've never heard this before. I've never heard this before. This is interesting. I wasn't sitting there bragging about my
No,
accomplishments. I was telling them things I've discovered,
of course.
and then it was a really good it was a really good conversation. And I think this circles back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of knowing who you are.
Mm-hmm.
If you're telling people what you do and who you are because you need their validation, or you need them to go ooh or ah or whatever, that's coming from a place of insecurity.
Yep.
And I don't think that's a very good place to come from.
Right.
Uh, if you're, however, coming from a place of, I'm living a fascinating adventure in the world, and I can share some of my adventure and discoveries with people,
Yes.
and the people who like hearing that, I'm going to hear their adventures and discoveries, then that's way better than going to some preening cocktail party where you're trying to be the most impressive person in the room.
Yes. I love that. That's great. You've detailed your journey a bunch of, so we won't have to spend like a ton of time going back into it, but can we just do like a quick sort of like condensed, almost like highlight journey or just like version of the story of how from where you started to now being, author of 10 books, the things that you're doing, like what is
So
that sort of condensed version?
I'm the guy who went to engineering school, and halfway through engineering school got recruited into multi-level marketing,
Yep.
and realized, as because of that, realized that the career of an engineer isn't probably as glamorous, as high paying as you might think it is. But then I stumbled around in uh, sales and marketing and entrepreneurship for several years. I drank a lot of pink Kool-Aid. I finally got pointed in the right direction when I discovered direct marketing.
Yes.
And the company I worked for was successfully sold, and I got some stock options, and I became a consultant, and I started writing books on Google advertising and 80/20. And then in the last few years, my second career as a scientist has blossomed very nicely, and
Yes.
I'm involved in a bunch of very interesting projects there. I have a $10 million prize for the origin of the genetic code, which I think is one of the deepest problems in all of science,
Mm-hmm.
and increasingly involved with scientists in cancer research and viruses and artificial intelligence. And really, I'm I knew a long time ago that if I was 45 years old and chained to some job because I needed the health insurance
Mhm.
with some guy's boot on my neck, I would be ridiculously unhappy because I'm curious and I'm motivated to make things happen in the world, to improve things in the world. And I just knew at a very primal level, somehow or another, you've got to have freedom and latitude in your life.
Mhm.
So that every morning when you wake up, you're doing what you think is really important and not just being jerked by some chain.
Right.
And so
Hmm.
that just continues to get more and more interesting because
Yeah.
mostly I'm surrounded by people like that.
Yes.
Most people that I know and work with, they all have businesses and they all have obligations, but for the most part, whatever their business is or whatever their obligations are,
Mhm.
it's what they've chosen to do.
Yes. Yes.
It's what they've chosen to be interested in.
Right.
And most of them are discovering new things all the time.
Mm.
And that makes for a very, very interesting life,
Yes.
very interesting peer group. And I feel like
Hmm.
the organization that I have of the seminars and the consulting and the mastermind groups and all of those kinds of things are for people who that's the kind of life they want too. They not only want to do business on their own terms, but they want to do it with people that they really like,
Hmm.
who are doing things in the world that are important
Right.
and making a contribution.
Yes.
And so all of those things together, that's awesome. That's
Yes, it's a life by design is like what came to my mind. That's yeah, that's beautiful. I think like a really good way for people to get deeper into just like learning from you and how you think and just like to feel more connected to the Planet Perry world is to go over some of the like the terms you threw a couple out, which is like for us like it's we this is like our lingo, like it's our vocabulary because we talk about it so much, but let's just come from like a perspective that somebody may not totally be familiar with like the values of the vocabulary. And so, and what's cool about these is like they touch and cover a wide range of topics. And I don't even think I've had a chance to like ask you some of the origin stories behind some of these as well. But one of them that you just threw out, let's start there. So drink the pink Kool-Aid. What does that mean? Where did that start?
well, that phrase I believe comes from 1979, where a guy named Jim Jones had a cult
Yes. Okay.
out
Yes.
in Guyana,
That's right.
and they drank cyanide,
That's right.
and there was 900 dead people, and that's
Gosh.
a metaphor. And yeah, if you want to have a really depressing and that's your idea of a good time,
Yeah,
go
right.
watch those documentaries and you can hear all about it.
Yes.
But it's a metaphor for getting brainwashed by cult-like organizations
Hmm.
into doing things that really aren't in your best interest. And I spent 7 years in multi-level marketing, and I consider my experience to be kind of a borderline cult indoctrination.
Right.
Um, and frankly, most MLM organizations are like that. And there are good things and bad things about that. But what's very common with many of my clients is they have at least one of those stories in their background.
Right.
Sometimes it's a church, or sometimes it's like some other kind of weird thing like that. In my case, I had to grow up and grow out of that. I
Mm.
think people people join organizations and become cult members
Mm.
because there are things they need that they're not getting from the rest of the world.
Right.
And many times, like when I look back on my experience, it was a result. I lost one and a half of my parents. My
Mm.
dad had died, and my mom was mentally ill, so she was really only kind of half available. And the church that I grew up in kind of broke apart when I was 19, and MLM filled those voids for me.
Right.
That's why I was there. And I don't think I understood that at the time. But looking back on it, I think it's very clear to me that I was getting parenting and a form of church from doing that.
Right.
And if you really understand MLM, you understand why that is, because you're in a line of sponsorships and there's all these people.
Yes.
And they're helping you through life.
Right.
And they actually do help you through life. It's not like we're making this up. They taught me, I mean, I'm a geeky engineer, propeller head, all of that. And they're teaching me to put on a white shirt, a red tie, and a blue sport coat and go out and talk to people. And when I get my teeth kicked in, they're scraping me up off the pavement, dusting me off, and I learned a lot of life skills there, like
Absolutely.
a lot.
Right.
Learned a lot of marketing and people skills and organizational skills that are almost second nature. I don't even have to think about them.
Right.
And I just do them.
Yeah.
So it's not like it didn't pay off. It's not like it didn't. It did.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's ingrained in you now. Yeah.
I also had to deprogram myself. Part of my marketing education was I couldn't. Different people handle these things different ways. I couldn't just suddenly wake up one day and go, this is not legit. I'm done.
Right.
Goodbye.
Right.
I was too entangled in it. I had to reverse engineer the whole thing until I completely understood almost like what had been done to me. I had to understand, okay, this is what it was from the audience side of the curtain, but now here's what it is from behind the curtain. I had to understand all of that before I could just kind of separate and walk away. And I think it took me about a year to disentangle the whole thing. Goodness. And like I'm reading these blogs and people's experiences and all these stories, and I'm talking to people behind the scenes who knew all kinds of things that they don't really tell regular people. And I'm like, okay, that's how it worked. That's how it worked. So I was understanding the mechanism of all of that. Yes. And I was also understanding how I had responded to it.
Right.
I was understanding the language patterns and the thinking behind it. And what that did was that helped me as after I left that behind and I went forward and I started to teach marketing.
Yes.
To teach entrepreneurs. It gave me a very clear sense of where my dotted line is. People need to belong to a community that's not a cult. One thing that you'll notice about my culture, because we have a whole culture of several thousand entrepreneurs that, they read the emails, they come to events, they do different things, is we don't try to control people's behavior and we don't guilt and manipulate people into conforming. We give people a lot of space to be themselves, but we also have a very definite set of beliefs and a very definite set of values. And we can't let this get smarmy. And a lot of times it does. And there are a lot of people out there, they're just looking for a place to plug in their umbilical cord and have somebody tell them what to do and give them simplistic answers. And what we try to do is we try to help people grow up.
Yes.
Be totally mature leaders, totally mature men and women. They don't need us.
Right.
But they come to us because they find our community to be valuable.
Right.
That's very.
I love that because it goes back to one of your like principles of being a good marketer is being able to like write someone like if you can know like the page that somebody has in their journal. So like you going through that and seeing like a lot of people that come to you have going through that as well. And you can be empathetic to that and then speak to somebody that and like meet them right where they're feeling. I really like that. And one of the other kind of big foundations of Planet Perry is Renaissance time. Can you define that for people?
So Renaissance time is the spiritual space that you maintain and cultivate typically right after you get out of bed.
Yep.
For 90% of the people that I know, that is the best time.
Yes.
Maybe some other people, it might be before they go to bed or some other time, but it's not any one thing. This is where we don't like dictate to people, but very typically it's journaling, meditation, scripture, prayer. Some people, it might be yoga or walking around the park or, sitting on a bench or watching the sunrise or something like that. But where you are deliberately making space to be spiritually centered and to have your thoughts and feelings sorted out before the day begins.
Yes.
I believe the worst thing that you can do to start your day is to reach across, like open your eyes, reach across the bedstand, grab a device, start the death scroll. That is the worst possible way you can start your day. Whether it's CNN or TikTok or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever. You woke up, your subconscious mind processed, you had dreams, you had all that stuff that happens while you're asleep. And it's like all this cream rose to the top. It's like taking a cup full of milk with cream risen to the top, walking outside, scraping all that cream off into the grass, and walking back inside and drinking the lower quality, whatever is on the bottom. That is what that is like, because you cannot have your own thoughts and somebody else's thoughts at the same time. It's either yours or theirs. And so you wake up and you refuse to get on devices.
Yes.
Instead, you go into introspection. For me, journaling works really well.
Same here.
But this is like most people, it's some combination of prayer, meditation, and or journaling.
Yep.
And you get yourself right in the world, and then you start your day.
Yes.
And you've already decided what your priorities are. You've had some space for gratitude. You've had some space for reflecting on what's really important today. You've had time to think about what are the really important questions that I'm trying to answer today. In many cases, it's also the time and space to think about your business, to think about what your plans are. And I have had so many people tell me, this has revolutionized my life. And really what I'm doing is I'm giving you permission.
Yeah, right.
I don't think if you really tuned into your truest natural self, I don't really think you wanted to get out of bed and start responding to putting out fires in your email box. I don't think you really wanted to do that. But all of this wiring and conditioning says, well, you guys just go. And when you set that aside and you put it off, okay, I'm not going to start that for at least another half an hour.
Yes, right.
It makes such a better quality of life. And what most people tell me is that they will ask, pick the language you want, God, the universe, the muse, the spirit. You ask questions and you listen for an answer, and you go, what should I do about Sally, the rogue employee? Or what should I do about this relationship conflict that's going on? Or what should I do about the speaking invitation that I'm a little ambivalent about, or whatever it might be.
Yep.
And they sit and listen. And very often I'll have people go, Harry, during my Renaissance time, I got a download, or I had an epiphany, or I woke up with just absolute clarity this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's making space for clarity.
Space. That's the
Now,
word. Yep.
this is the most important habit that I have cultivated. And we're having this conversation on May 31. I started Renaissance Time 10 years ago on June 2.
All right.
I haven't missed a day in 10 years.
Wow, Perry.
The few days where it got pushed off, well, I had an early plane flight and I did
Yep.
it on the plane, or
Right.
it got pushed to noon. Once in a while, it'll get pushed off to another part of the day. But 99% of the time, it happens first thing in the morning when I get out of bed. And it's the best habit that I have cultivated in my adult life.
Mm. Everything you said rings true for me too. It gets me bouncing out of bed. I mean, like I said at the top of the podcast, right? Like I was 20, maybe I was 22. It was 2019 when I first met you, and I got really deep into reading and learning more from you in 2020. And obviously we all know what happened during 2020. And without Renaissance Time, like I said at the top, I picked my language very carefully, because like what led to me discovering more about myself was listening. Like that's what it was. I picked that language very clearly because that's what it was, what I was doing during that time. And that led to, we don't have to get into the detox, declutter, dominate whole thing, because I just would encourage people to go and read that book because it's fantastic. And I just encourage people to lean into that. But yes, I mean, everything you said totally rings true for me too. And it is a combination of journaling and just breathing and meditating, and just, it's space. That's what it is. I just slow down a little bit and just allow myself to kind of like look at things fresh is the way that I do it. Just like a fresh perspective every day.
You are listening to yourself, and you're listening to, pick the term, God, spirit, right, the cosmic consciousness, the muse.
Yep.
You really can't listen to one unless you can listen to the other. Now, I think it starts with listening to yourself. I can tell you that when I was a teenager, there was a lot of trauma in our family. There was a lot of dysfunction, and I shut down the communication between my head and my heart. It was too much. And a lot of Renaissance time, and even before then, because there's been a lot of water under the bridge, was me. I had to go through a phase of my life where I opened those channels back up and cleared them out.
Right.
It's like when you go to a house that's been sitting empty for a year and you turn on the water and all this rusty.
Jeez, right. That's a great analogy.
That's what it was like for me.
Yeah.
I had to get that connection flowing, and I had to learn to listen to myself. I can go through, before I started doing that, I can go through my history and I can name time after time after time when I was getting into a bad situation. My gut was trying to tell me there's something wrong here. I was not listening. And I can name bad bosses, bad business deals, bad situations where my brain was like, that sounds great. And my gut was like, that's not great. Do you know that you have a huge amount of neurons and thinking cells in your stomach, literally?
I didn't know that.
It's actually true. They're called ganglia. You go down that rabbit hole if you want to go learn about it.
Absolutely.
But there is a whole bunch of thinking that happens in your body. We are told that all of our thinking goes on in our brains, but that's not really true. There's a whole system going on there. And like sometimes you'll get a phone call, or maybe your spouse gets a phone call, and the minute you find out who it is, you feel this blood flushing through your body, or you feel your stomach, you do something. That's your body thinking. You're like, I don't like that person. Why are they calling you right now? no, we're not doing that. It's usually right.
That's so interesting. One of the like a term that continues to sort of be like that bubbles up and continues to be featured in your world is the term Renaissance, right? So like Renaissance time, the new Renaissance members of of Planet Perry. I think you're a true Renaissance man, like just being an author, being an engineer, being a speaker, all these things. And it was something that was coming back up. So we were a week off of the traffic seminar from last week, and it was like a big thing that we talked about is sort of like the interdisciplinary, sort of exploration of being, having a exposure to this market that or this type of industry that leads to something like this. And one of my favorite books that talks about this really well is a book that the great Scott Shane gave me when I was first getting mentored by him, was called The Medici Effect. Obviously, the Medicis are the Italian baking family that sponsored the Renaissance. And so I would encourage anybody to read that. But I wanted to talk to you about one of the recent newsletters that came out. You talked about sort of the 5 phases of a new Renaissance entrepreneur. And so one of them being the 0 to 100K, being the beginner. Obviously, you and I did the program on that. The next level being 100K to 250K. That's kind of the bootstrapper level. That's kind of where I'm playing this game right now. 250K to $1 million being the true entrepreneur. 1 million to 10 million, was it CEO or El Presidente at that level?
1 to 10,
1 to 10, or
or
maybe it was 1 to 5.
1 to 2.5, probably.
1 to 2.5.
That's probably El Presidente.
El Presidente. Yeah.
And 10 is CEO.
Yes, 8-figure and beyond. Can you talk to me about like the different modes of thinking, the changes of behavior, like just changes overall, like in a business, or sort of like the actions that come from just like ascending through those levels? Like what, like from you now, like going through it yourself and consulting with a lot of people that go through it, like what do you see? What do you see is happening like as you ascend through those levels?
Well, most people, if they're at 100K or below, are probably, in truth, they're really helping somebody else's business.
Yeah, right.
They're either,
which is how I started,
a consultant or
right,
a coach,
totally,
or maybe they're a reseller of some kind, and and they're moving a product from A to B. And like, you just need to be really clear about that. Like
right.
a successful freelance consultant is probably just somebody who's doing work for 5 different businesses.
Mm-hmm.
They lose one of them, they can replace them,
Right.
and they are therefore doing it on their terms instead of whatever somebody else tells them to do. And that's like the first rung of the ladder.
Right.
Well, then you have the range, let's say, to roughly 250,000 or so,
Yep.
where at that point it really probably is somebody else's business, or excuse me, it really is you can consider it your business instead of somebody else's, because you have sufficient control of your destiny, but you're still doing it all yourself.
Right.
At the $1 million level, you have employees and you're not doing it all yourself, but you still are a glorified cook and bottle washer. At the level of about 2 to 3 million, you're still in the center of it, and a lot of it still flows through you, but most of the day-to-day is being delegated.
Mm-hmm.
There's a giant leap that happens when you get up above about 3 or 4 million, which is you have become not essential. And that is not easy to pull off, but it is a completely different kind of business at that point. And one of the things that holds people back at that point is you are now a bona fide corporation with processes and procedures and policies and manuals and employee conduct, and what a lot of entrepreneurs frankly think of as bureaucracy. Okay, it's really just necessary for any organization to be independent of one genius or one super hyper maniac,
right,
who can put out 17 fires an hour. it has to become decentralized,
Mhm.
which means it also means it's not as agile, and
Right.
it's not going to turn on a dime. It also means it's not nearly as susceptible to the idea of the week
Mhm.
or the fantasy du jour. But I have worked with lots of people at all of those levels.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of a sketch of what those growth processes look like.
One of the terms is seven-figure desert. Where did that originate from?
Well, seven figure desert really refers to the point, it's usually somewhere around 4 or 5 million,
Okay.
where
Hmm.
you have to go from the being the gal or the guy
Mm-hmm.
that everything is running through to having it all externalized to where you could die, you could sell the business, you could
Right.
go on vacation, you could go start something else, and the company would continue to run without the way
Got
Henry
it.
Ford's been gone for a really long time, but
Yes.
Ford's still making and selling cars every day.
Yes. Right.
And the seven figure desert is really, it is the catch 22 of I'm too big to not have these systems, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
too small to have the systems I need. And and so
Hmm.
getting myself out of the middle of I don't know how to disentangle myself from this, because everything that I try to do to disentangle myself makes more work that sucks me back in.
Yes. That's so interesting. So obviously, Perry, like you've accomplished a ton in your career, being a writer and the consultant and doing these things. And like I think from like the outside looking in, it's like this guy's like he's written 10 books. Like how is he doing all of this, right? And I think people's maybe like the initial reaction is like, oh, he must be really good at managing his time. And time is like an interesting concept to me because I think it was like originally used to like measure distance, not like we think about it like past, present, future, hours, minutes, kind of in that sense. But your philosophy around Renaissance time obviously is a big part of that. And I think when people ask about this, it's like, what's a typical day in the life look like? I think it's a little bit too minute because it doesn't paint the whole story. And your philosophy about like taking some time off like once a month or once a quarter and kind of doing that. Can you just take me through like this is how I structure a day, how I structure a week, how I think about a month, a quarter, a year, even if you're thinking beyond that? Like what does that sort of look like?
So let's a typical Wednesday
Yeah.
look like this. I'll wake up around 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do 2 hours of Renaissance time. For a
Right.
long time, it was 1 hour.
Yep.
In the last year, I added another hour because I knew I needed it.
Yep.
By the way, most people aren't going to know what to do with an hour. Start with 15 minutes,
Yeah.
start with 20, and just work from there. 15 is perfectly fine. What you'll find see, this is a muscle
Mm-hmm.
develop. And as you develop the muscle, you'll find there's more to think about. There's more to sort out. And by doing that, you can then be more and more effective later in the day. So anyway, sometime around 9 or so, I shift into now I'm doing the most important, most strategic, active work that needs to be done right now. Um, it's the stuff that requires the most creative resourcefulness and the most clear original thought.
Mm.
Um, it's if I'm doing routine stuff that I normally do every day, that's the wrong thing to be doing.
Yep.
That's later. Why? Because most people are freshest and sharpest before noon.
Mm-hmm.
So I make sure that my prime thinking and acting and being present time is the time when I'm working on, like, if I've got a seminar that I'm putting together, then that's when I plan it, or that's when I write the sales promotions. Or if I'm writing a book or a scientific paper, that's when I do my writing. Or if I got some other problem that I don't know how to solve, that's when I figure out how to solve that problem.
Yes.
Nobody can do the thinking of your business for you.
Yeah.
You just can't. So then at 11:30, that's when I'm probably starting to get a little tired. Like, right, okay, I've wrung out the dish rag a little bit here. So then I put on my Bluetooth headset, I get on my bike, and I call my personal assistant, my
Yep.
executive assistant. She's in charge of my email box. I don't sit and type my emails. My assistant either tells me or reads me the emails, and I dictate back to her what to do or how to respond. And she's already pre-filtered and handled as much of it as she can. So that usually takes about an hour, and then we've got email taken care of. Now that's in contrast to most people who
Right.
are in and out of their email box
All day long. Yeah.
and their life is run by the email box. And then now it's afternoon, and that's when I do like run the business or do consultations or do the meat and potatoes work of the business. That I know how to do this. I'm not trying to split the atom right now. Somebody wants to talk about their traffic or their marketing or their business strategy, and they're asking questions about stuff I already wrote a book about. That's what I do in the afternoon.
Yes.
And then at dinner time, I'm done with my day.
Right.
And this is a super productive formula. And one of my highest priorities is how much can be delegated or crossed off. How much can my executive assistant handle? How much can the president of my company handle? How much? I've got a team of a dozen people, and some people only have a team of one person or two people, and it's going to be different.
Right.
There's CEOs who have 10,000 employees.
Yep.
So these are all different, but I'm telling you, this is a very effective way to manage a schedule. And I am involved in a lot of things. I'm going to Europe next week. You can look at my Wikipedia page, or you could look at the perrymarshall.info. I'm involved in a lot of stuff. And what I'm always trying to do is I'm always trying to be involved in the 1% of an activity that makes 50% of the difference.
Right.
I'm always working on the super high leverage stuff. And, in Detox, Declutter, Dominate, I talk about there's $10 an hour work, $100 an hour work, there's $1,000 an hour work, and there's $10,000 an hour work. And I'm trying to do as much. So the morning time, that's $10,000 an hour work.
Yes.
Stuff that only I can do.
Yes.
And then the afternoon is what I would more think of as $1,000 an hour work. And $10,000 an hour work, the way I'm describing it here, is kind of unpredictable. Now, there's some $10,000 an hour work that is predictable. The high leverage stuff in marketing is that way. It's why marketing is a pretty well-paying profession.
Right.
Is because there are major levers. If you figure out how to get 10,000 people to your website, that's $10,000 an hour work.
Certainly.
But maybe the part that I think everybody should be thinking about is, how can I do 1 or 2 hours of $1,000 an hour work every afternoon at least 1 or 2 hours a day
Mm.
and get paid for it.
Yes.
And if you can figure out how to do that, you'll probably have a pretty pleasant work life.
Hmm.
Trying to do more and more $10 an hour work by being super hyper efficient or working faster, not good. Doesn't work.
I feel like that's the tendency too. Like as you start to ascend those levels and you get busier, it's just like, well, I'm just going to work
Mhm.
more or work faster, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
A lot of people do that. And that's not, yeah, just working harder and working faster. That is not it.
right. I think it was Tom that talked about it last week at the traffic seminar that like your job as the business owner is to own the process and refine the process. And the work is sort of like the side hustle, the way that he framed it, which like I expressed it to you when we talked, and like that is still something that like is starting to kind of click and kind of singe for me a little bit more because I was ascending through that level of like I am the buck kind of stops with me. I am the one fulfilling and doing it. And I'm rising and like, okay, I'm setting and productizing my service. I'm setting the process, I'm setting the standard and getting like the reps of handing that to somebody. And so that's still it's new to me, but like things click when you're like, oh wow, this makes sense. Everything that Barry's been teaching me finally makes sense. I wanted to like break down sort of some downloads from the traffic seminar last week and talk about it a little bit because I'd love to hear just what some of your takeaways were. I mean, mine were sort of critically thinking, like this has become more and more important. And I went into that, and it was a lot of the questions that I asked there was just like understanding how people there are thinking. Like, I just want to teach me how you are thinking. You don't need to feed me the answers. I don't want the answers. Like, teach me how to think and think my way through these problems. That was a really big piece of it. Being strong yet agile. You need people and community more than ever. That was a really big part of it. But I'd love to hear, I mean, like you put on the seminar and you were, got to be a part of a lot of that. Like, what were some of your takeaways?
There is a ton of hysteria about AI,
Yeah.
especially in certain circles. And there is one narrative in the AI discussion that is absolutely wrong. And it is the idea that the AI is going to wake up, become super intelligent, and wipe out humanity.
Hmm.
They do not, there is nothing awake about any of the AI. There's nobody home. It's not having a personal experience. It doesn't have any will of its own. It's it's just a very, 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 very sophisticated calculator.
Yep. Right.
Okay, like think of a pocket calculator. It's not any more alive than a Casio pocket calculator. And you have to. I think this is literally the starting point of the conversation because there are a lot of very educated people
Hmm.
that don't understand this. I mean, world famous thought leaders like Sam Harris um, or a lot of like famous people. Ray Kurzweil, who
Hmm.
used to be the engineering manager at Google, um, and what they are what is being lost in the conversation is that all of these platforms are owned by people. The people that train them, program them, own them, invest in them are responsible for what they do. And you, as a user, are responsible for the outputs that you generate.
Hmm.
And um, so that whole narrative about AI taking over the world is really just a distraction from the fact that what it's really doing is it's making a small number of people in the world extremely powerful.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that that makes them bad. I'm just saying it makes them very powerful. And so I think this is going to create a existential crisis a little bit like COVID did. Maybe Macedo was talking to me about this the other day. COVID thrust a lot of people into a personal crisis of who am I
Yep.
and And some people, a lot of people used COVID as an opportunity to binge watch a whole bunch of Netflix shows. And some people used COVID as an opportunity to do stuff they would never be able to accomplish any other time. They wrote books, they organized conferences. Like we organized the Cancer and Evolution working group, which is now has 3,500 member scientists. And I don't think that would have happened not in a pandemic. I think the fact that everybody was stuck at home with all of this nervous energy that they had to channel into something, I think that helped that go forward. We all know people, and some of the people listening, like, yeah, during COVID, you did stuff. You may not have liked it or whatever, but you took full advantage. And I think AI is going to create an existential crisis where people are like, well, I used to think that I was a human because I could write a good haiku, or because I could write a song, or because I could write or say something in a certain style. And now a machine learning algorithm can do all that. It can do it better than I can. Okay, so guess what? Being able to do that isn't what makes you human. Something else is. And I think this is going to even more sharply separate the people who believe that life is fundamentally a spiritual pursuit versus people that think that life is fundamentally a materialistic physical pursuit.
Wow.
And so all of those questions are going to get pushed right to the surface, because like at the AI seminar, people were discussing things that a year ago I would have classified as highly philosophical discussions. Like one of my speakers, Joseph Riggio, talked multiple points in his talk about the word qualia. Well, qualia is a philosophical term for there's no way to prove that when I see the color red, I have the same experience that you're having when you see the color red.
Yes.
We can use the word and I can describe it as much as I can, but I cannot crawl inside your head and have the experience you're having.
Right.
You can only listen to your description of your experience. Well, that conversation's been going on in philosophy forever. Well, now everybody's having it. The word qualia probably isn't a household word yet. Probably in 2 years it will be. Well, the question of whether anybody's home in AI is a qualia problem. I can't prove to you experientially that there's nobody home in ChatGPT. Right. I did a scientific paper offering a mathematical proof of that 2 years ago, which is a whole other discussion. But this is going to force people. I don't want to lose the point here.
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah.
People are going to be forced to rethink and reevaluate what does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to be valuable in the world, and what are we supposed to do? One of the things Sam Woods talked about, how up until just now, technology has always been something that mostly humans adapt to. We're not even used to thinking about this because we do it so naturally. Everybody knows how to use a search engine. We all learned how to use a search engine.
Right.
Most people learned a long time ago, you don't really type a paragraph question into a search engine and expect it to understand you. They know that you type in plumber, Peoria, Illinois, to find plumbers in Peoria, Illinois.
Right.
That is us adapting to the technology. and we build websites, and we write blogs, and we build cars, and we drive cars on the right side of the road. We are conforming to technology all the time. We have hit a point where for the first time, the technology is actually conforming to us. We are training the AI. So what that means is it's possible to envision a world where the technology just serves you and you don't have to adapt to it. Now that's mind-bending. I don't think it'll be mind-bending 3 years from now.
Right.
It is totally not what people are used to. And Sam, I just talked to Sam yesterday. He's a brilliant AI guy.
Yes.
In Woods. And he said, you know, I'm really think most people do not want a dystopia. I'm like, you're right. There's some people who do. There's some people they want it. Or there's some people that they may not think they want it, but they're so convinced it's going to happen that they're just going to let it. They're going to roll over and let it happen anyway. Well, I think there's a lot of people. No, I don't want a Orwellian world controlling everything that I do.
Yes, right.
But we're at a crossroads, and I think the only way that you can move through that crossroads is to retain your humanity. And the way that you do it is by nourishing your spiritual self. Renaissance time and all of those practices. I think you're going to see a resurgence of traditional spiritual practices in the next 5 years that connect people back to. I've had numerous people tell me that they see a significant uptick in, like, for example, religious liturgies. I don't think it's a coincidence that one of my longtime favorite clients, Tom Donald, just a few months ago finished recording a piano improvisation recording and video that he did with the monks of a abbey in northern Scotland that does Gregorian chant the same way it was 900 years ago.
Wow.
It took him 2 years to convince them that doing this project with them would not corrupt their art, their worship, and their spiritual space.
Yes.
He just kind of, he wasn't strong arming them. He just approached them and he said, I think it'd be really beautiful to do. And they finally said, yeah, I think that would be great. And it's absolutely beautiful. And if you search on, if you search for Tom Donald Gregorian chant, you'll find it. You can buy it on SoundCloud, and you can. He's got some videos where you can watch some of it. But I'm talking about liturgy. What is liturgy? It's when you go through a ceremonial process of singing, of rising, of sitting, of listening to sacred texts. Most people don't even relate to this. They don't even have any idea what it's about. It's extremely calming and extremely centering to put yourself into a language pattern that you know is 500, 1,000, 2,000 years old. The Jewish people, some of this goes back 3,000 or 4,000 years. There's a reason the Jewish civilization is the oldest intact civilization. Persia's gone, Babylon's gone, Rome is gone, Greece is gone. There's still a country called Greece, but the Greeks are gone. And most civilizations are gone. But you have these other civilizations that engage in rituals and liturgies and religious practices, and they hold together for centuries and millennia. You think people in the most technologically disruptive time in all of history, don't think for a minute that people aren't going to want this.
Right.
So you're going to see more of it.
Hmm.
And I think you're going to find the people who navigate the technology or the best are the people who can shut it all off
Mm-hmm.
and even possibly even put on a monk's robe
Mm-hmm.
and and channel that space and center themselves and be okay in the midst of all of the chaos.
There's two questions or sort of two topics that I want to wrap this up on because it's perfect. The spiritual pursuit versus the material pursuit. It's exactly what this is going to lead into, because at the end of the seminar, you asked everybody in the room, right, to write a little bit about what do you really want to do in your lives? What's the plateau you're bouncing against? And this question was so interesting to me. What purpose slash mission slash intention am I feeling disconnected from? And your encouragement was between now and the end of the year, go away for a few days and wrestle with this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of that sort of spiritual pursuit. And that's nothing that I've done. I haven't been intentional of going and do something like that before. And it's just stayed in my heart the last couple of days of just thinking about that and planning and really like planning it, like being like, oh, this is what I want to do. I'm like legitimately so excited to do it. When you do that, like when you've had the experience of doing that, like do you go in, what's your sort of formula for doing that? Like do you have a question, multiple questions? Do you go in with like a journal or books? Like how do you structure when you go and do something like that?
Well, I'll just generalize it to heart work. There's
Yeah.
times I know I need to do heart work.
Yeah, heart work. That's great, Perry.
Um,
Heart work.
uh, yeah, not hard work.
Right. Heart
Heart
work.
work. Heart work can be hard work. In fact,
Yes.
in many
Yeah.
respects, it's the hardest work there is.
Yes, 100%.
But it doesn't look like,
Right.
digging ditches. But like I did this 6 months ago. I spent a week in Ireland just to do heart work. And you don't have to go to Ireland, but you do need to go, you know, go to a cabin by a lake or
Yeah,
go,
like a ceremony, right?
yeah.
Yes.
And I just made 100% space,
Mm.
and I sort of gave my body and myself, let's call it a system-wide bulletin.
Mm.
Um, we are here to let all of the buried little messages come to the surface and be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that particular trip, it was mostly inner child work because I have a counselor, and she gave me some assignments, and it was basically, you've got some patches of age 4, age 5, age 13 where um, you were not getting listened to. And that's
Yeah.
why you shut off those connections that we talked about earlier. And I want you to open those back up. And if your 4-year-old is angry and wants to stomp around, then I want you to listen to that. And I did, and I got a lot of insight. And when you go through an exercise of listening to yourself, and so just backing out and generalizing again to heart work, it's where you give yourself space and time to do nothing but listen to your heart, listen to your soul, and do whatever, have whatever conversation. Maybe it should have happened 20 or 30 years ago, but it never happened. And it's kind of been waiting to happen. And usually when that's going on, these things manifest themselves as addictions and OCD and behavior patterns that you don't seem to have any control of. Is because usually there's some emotional circuit that's like, somebody listen to me, somebody listen to me, or I need something, but the bottle of whiskey never seems to quite do it, or the sex never seems to quite do it, or the accomplishment, or whatever you're addicted to. It's usually because there's parts of yourself that need to be listened to, or there's a message from the universe that you're not listening to, or there's something that you're in denial about. And mostly what I've found needs to happen is you just need to listen to all that without judgment.
Mm.
Let it just let it happen.
Yep.
Usually you'll find it to be, it kind of emotionally knocks you off center for a little while.
Right.
In fact, my counselor told me when I was doing all this, you need to let your family know, hey, I'm doing a bunch of work. In fact, it was, remember that family conversation that got really tense a couple of months ago and all these things came up? Well, I got some things I need to work on. And I just know for a fact my emotions are bouncing all over the place. I'm more irritable than I usually am. I'm going to try to be, as civil and amicable as I can, but I just need you to know
Mm-hmm.
processing some stuff right now. And they're like, okay. And the thing that I think my family got out of it was, okay, if it's okay for dad to go do this kind of work, then it's probably okay for me to do this kind of work too.
Yes.
And one of the things I'm most proud of literally all of my kids is all of my kids have done this kind of work.
Mm.
And I think it shows.
Mm-hmm.
I think my kids are much more mature than their age would suggest.
Mm-hmm.
They deal with change better and they're less bent out of shape, less upset about things.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that it's okay to do this kind of work. I didn't really understand that it was okay to do this kind of work until I was in my late 30s.
Mm.
By that time, I had accumulated a bucket load
Yes.
of crap
Right.
that I then had to go sort out. I think it's much better to sort this stuff out at age 25 than it is at age 45.
Yep.
Uh, my daughter's 27 and she'd already done a lot of this stuff by age 25. And I think as a result, like I don't foresee her having a yucky, awful midlife crisis when she's 40.
Right.
I know people have completely gone off the rails. I knew when I was in first year of college, the mother of one of my friends, she left her husband, started college as a freshman, just like all the rest of us, and started sleeping with everybody in pants.
Mm.
And it was really weird to see a 42-year-old woman sleeping with 21-year-old guys in college. You're like, that's a little weird.
Yeah.
But and I mean, I'm not her therapist, and I don't really claim to know, but I do know that she had to grow up really fast
Mm-hmm.
in circumstances in her life, and I think her inner college freshman just came roaring out at age 40. And this is the kind of stuff that you can prevent
right
doing the soul work. And see, a lot of people are going to think, oh, this is about AI, or this is about Joe Biden, or this is about Donald Trump, or this is about COVID, or this is about no. I mean, I know these things trigger you.
Yeah, right.
But those things are not what any of this is about. This is about you. This is about your emotions. This is about your family. This is about, and it's very important to do that kind of work. And when you go do that work, you come out of the other side with a whole lot more of yourself than you had before.
That's great. I love that. And it goes back to what you were saying, right? Like when people think about sort of the human journey, it's like the spiritual pursuit of that versus the material pursuit, right? And this is where I want to sort of put a little button and just wrap all this stuff up as like, people, I mean, I'm guilty of this, like getting into entrepreneurship, getting into business is like, I'm gonna make a bunch of money and I'm gonna have the big house and the flashy car and the flashy watches and all these things. And this might sound so random because I really love watches. I've loved watches from the very get-go. I think they're engineering feats. I mean, yes, they're a show of wealth, but I think, and again, I go back to like time. Time is just something that like I've always been fascinated by. I love watches, like I really do.
I do too, actually.
Well, I was just gonna, because it's so random. Because go ahead.
Fetish for me. I think the most expensive watch I might have is $300, and I've got about a dozen of them, and it's really not a big deal.
Right.
I do like watches.
Well, I was just gonna say, Perry, it's so funny because from the first time I met you to every time I've ever been with you in person, even the watch that you're wearing now has always been the same one. And I'm like, it's just so like it was refreshing to me, quite honestly, to be like, he's doing this at such a high level and like he's wearing the same watch. And like it's like, so cool. So like what's your at this point, like your how has your relationship with money just evolved? Like how you think about wealth and like just like your feeling and just relationship with money now. Like how has that changed how you think about wealth? Like is it just I'm not the flashiness just doesn't appeal to me? Like what's your feeling towards that?
Oh, well, um, money's not about blame for me. For me, money is
Hmm.
um money is how you do what you want to do every day.
Yeah.
And like for some people, it's driving a Tesla or having a mansion or a yacht or whatever. And I just never really found that kind of stuff to be very interesting. Now, I'll give you another example of using money. The $10 million Evolution 2.0 prize
Yeah.
is really, I needed the most Homer Simpson possible way to prove to anybody in 5 seconds that one of the most important questions in the history of science has not been answered. And you
Yes.
don't get to make up a story about a warm pond and a lucky lightning strike and pass it off as though everybody agrees this,
Right.
when in fact we haven't even solved 1% of this problem
Yeah.
yet.
Right.
And I needed a way of decisively changing the direction of that conversation in the world.
Mm-hmm. Of
By the way, ties into a whole lot. We don't have time to explain. This has
course.
a great to do with AI. It has to do with cancer. It has to do with evolution. It has to do with viruses. It has to do with a whole bunch of very deep things, technological, medical, and there's just this whole more and more things flowing out of that. Um, but and if somebody discovers this and the prize gets won and we move forward with it, it could make us all billionaires. But that's, to me, isn't really the point.
Right.
The point is there's this mystery that
Mm-hmm.
we need to take very seriously, and we can't just shrug it off with flippant, just so answers. So I don't know, maybe that gives you a little bit of a window into how I think about money.
100%. It really, because it just was always something that I was like so curious to just like ask you about and talk to you about. Because again, like I said, from the day that I met you and I've always seen you, I'm like, he's always wearing that watch. And I think that's such a
Well, I
cool,
have
like,
about 12 watches, but this one's my favorite one.
I love it.
My gave it to me, and it's a Skagen, and I think it's really cool. And but I do have other ones. Even I even have a Casio F91,
All right.
like the world's most basic nerd watch. It's
Mm-hmm.
most popular watches of all time, and
Yep.
I feel like a propeller head engineer. That's put on.
I
And
love it.
there are days when I just feel like being a propeller head engineer.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I'm wearing a Casio G-Shock right now. When I that's like this is my daily driver. Like I love this thing. And I think it's not necessarily how much the watch costs. It's about what it tells you. Like that's true
Yes,
value in that sense.
yes, yes. In fact, um, uh, many things in my life, especially my stereo equipment, because I build stereo equipment,
Mm-hmm.
all of the projects have these symbolic meanings of what they actually represent.
Right.
A good exercise for the people listening would be just inquire, like, your favorite set of golf clubs,
Mm-hmm.
or your Mazda Miata, or the oil painting in your living room, or or the china dishes that you got from your grandma, whatever it is that is some possession that you really like. What does this possession actually represent to me? What archetype, metaphor, story does this, and what does it say about me?
Yes.
I like this so much. What is it about this that I admire? If you go, if what you admire about your favorite golf clubs is probably the values you most want to embody in the world. Power, accuracy, distance.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. Go journal on this for a while. It'll reveal things to you about yourself.
That's fantastic. Let's wrap there. That was Perry. This was an absolute joy. Seriously. Yeah. Thank you again. This was so much fun. I really appreciate it. If anybody, like, I would just say Google Perry's name and go on a deep dive of just the books. Like, just go there. There's so much information to be on there. Any final words, Perry? Anything else you want to leave with anybody?
I think the next few years, there's going to be tremendous change in the next few years. Nobody can stop it. Congress can't stop it. Nobody can. Your ability to navigate all that has much more to do with your emotional maturity and your ability to give and receive honest feedback than it has to do with your technical skills or your career skills. That's really what's going to keep your anxiety in the reasonable range. All of this change swirls around you.
Fantastic. There you have it. Perry, again, thank you so much. Everybody watching, listening, hope you guys got a lot of value from this. To all my builders out there, I salute you, and I will see you guys in the next episode.
Thank you.